Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful in Edmonton and around the world. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy and Kurt Leavins. Hey, Kurt. Hey, Bruce.
Fellas.
That was Kurt.
That was Kurt. I was thinking, what can I do here? I didn't think that it was Kurt, but it was Kurt, Bruce. We are joined here tonight to contemplate the what every Canadian is thinking about, the coming games between the Vancouver Canucks and the Calgary Flames. Bruce, I bet you can't wait to dig into that game tonight.
There's one playing on my TV in the background. The Tampa Bay game just ended and I didn't change the channel before I came in here. I'm guessing my wife will.
Yes, she will. Actually, we're here to talk about the Oilers. And let me just see if we've gone live. And no one will know that we're on. I don't know if people get how people, sometimes people join in the chat, and I don't know how they do that. But let me just see if anyone's here yet. Anyway, we're going to be talking about the Winnipeg Jets and Edmonton Oilers playoff series, which is upcoming. I'll just quickly, what we're going to do is, to provide some structure, we'll go through the line combinations of both teams, and we'll just have a little discussion about what we think of how they're stacking up right now. Just to start off, though, I'll just quickly go through some of the statistics that we saw in the 9 games that they played this season. They were pretty close teams in the standings in the end, but in the 9 games that they played, Edmonton won 7 and lost 2. On average, they scored 3.8 goals per game to the Jets' 2.4 goals per game. When it came to grade A chances, the Oilers had 11.9 grade A chances per game to just 9 for the Jets. So the actual score was a little bit more exaggerated than the grade A chances, but the Oilers also had a significant edge when it came to grade A chances between the two teams in the 9 games that they played. Edmonton, in the end, was pretty dominant over the Jets. The Oilers' power play finished first. The Jets' power play finished 7th, so they were both pretty good power plays. Edmonton's penalty kill finished on a real hot streak and finished 9th in the NHL. And the Jets finished 14th overall in the NHL, so they were not bad either. There's not much separating them on special teams, but again, Edmonton has the edge overall this year in those 2 categories. The Jets ended up, they were on a losing streak for a while, but I was listening to some Jets podcasts, and they won 3 of their last 5 games, and they're feeling a little bit better about themselves, though they're not completely good. Any general thoughts? Just it looks like to me like the Oilers have the edge going in, but it's probably not as great an edge as we saw in the regular season. Like these teams are probably fairly close. Their overall record of the season is probably more indicative of how close this series is going to be than what we saw in those 9 games where the Oilers really dominated. Your thoughts? Go ahead, Kurt.
Well, I've picked the Oilers in 6, and when I broke the 2 teams down, I took a look at 7 key areas: special teams, defense, goaltending, depth, toughness, health, and the best players. And I gave Edmonton the edge in 5 of those 7 categories. And so I think that the season series, while I have a lot of respect for the Jets, I think the season series could be indicative of what we will see in the playoffs. And there's 2 key areas that I see as being probably ones that the series will turn on. One will be the relative health of the 2 teams, where Edmonton certainly has the edge, and the blue line, where I think the Oilers have the better blue line, and in a number of areas, and I just don't think the Jets' blue line has the horses to stop McDavid and Draisaitl, and that's why I ended up picking Edmonton in 6.
Kurt, just real quick, what were the 2 areas where you had Winnipeg ahead of the Oilers?
I gave them a very slight edge in goaltending, even though Mike Smith had a better year. I'm giving Connor Hellebuck the benefit of the doubt, being the defending Vezina Trophy winner. He's an excellent goaltender, and he does have the ability to steal a couple of games in this series. The other area where I gave Winnipeg the edge was forward depth. I think down the middle and generally over four lines, I do think Winnipeg has better depth. So those are the two areas where I think they probably have a legitimate edge on Edmonton. Although I don't think huge in the goaltending side, a little bit more perhaps on the forward depth end of things.
Bruce, your thoughts, general thoughts, as we start out this?
Well, the real key thing is the health of Winnipeg's group. They have some pretty significant players that are either wearing non-contact jerseys or weren't at practice at all. Foremost among them, Nick Ehlers, fantastic to my mind, two-way forward. And I mean, fans of Mark Scheifele would argue, but to me, he's just about Winnipeg's best all-around forward. I thought he had the better year anyway. And he missed the last few weeks, and Winnipeg really went deep in the tank when he was out. And they did recover. They won their last two games, I think, 5-0 over Vancouver to clinch third place, and then they beat Toronto in the very last tune-up game. And it looked like they might be coming out of it a little bit, but they had a couple more guys banged up. Paul Stastny, that I think missed practice today. It was in Murat's tweet, David. That was in your post. Which guys were either in non-contact jerseys or not out there at all. And there were some pretty significant players.
Yeah, there was Stastny and Dubois weren't on the ice. They got injured in their last game of the year, Bruce. Like we were talking about this. Tippett said the main thing he got out of Edmonton's last game was nobody got hurt. Well, that didn't happen in Winnipeg. Dubois and Stastny got banged up, and they weren't on the ice today. And Ehlers and Kopp were skating, but no contact. And I agree with Bruce. There's lots of really good players in the Canadian division. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that I saw an opposing forward. I'll go with two opposing forwards that absolutely scared the hell out of me whenever they had the puck. Mitch Marner in Toronto and Nikolai Ehlers in Winnipeg. Similar, fast, smaller players, but
shifty, eh?
Ehlers has been an Oilers killer. I don't know what his stats are against the Oilers, but he's just such a fine hockey player, and he's doubtful. From listening to the podcast, they think he'll be back, but he's iffy. They don't know if he's going to be back for the first game. So there you have it.
He's not like Nikita Kucherov, miraculously recovered from his life-threatening injury.
Kucherov scored twice today. Hey, the layoff didn't seem to leave too much rust on the old wheels.
I saw that, yeah.
Alrighty,
let's sour about how Tampa gamed the system, but that's a subject for another podcast.
Yeah. I always give credit. If you're not cheating, you're not trying, Bruce. That's what Glenn Saylor used to say.
Well, they're trying pretty hard. That's all I'll say to that.
Well, more power to them. This is just, it's not a lot riding on it except who wins and loses, and they're doing what they can. All right, Bruce, let's go ahead.
I'm just saying, I'm just warming up for the Stanley Cup Finals when it comes down to Edmonton against Tampa Bay. I want to have a good Mad-On worked up in advance.
Alrighty, let's start going through the lineup, and we'll start with the Oilers lineup, and we'll just start because I think it's we're going to talk about the top two lines on the Oilers both at once. So what we see right now heading into this shindig is the top line projected lines, as Bob Stauffer of the Oilers put it, for the Winnipeg series: Kahun, Connor McDavid, and on the top line, and on the second line, the dynamite line of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl, and Kyler Yamamoto. Now, it's interesting, the Oilers' most effective line this year, quite easily, was Leon Draisaitl, Kyler Yamamoto, and Connor McDavid. They played together 146 even strength minutes, and they scored 13 goals and just gave up 3. They had an 81% goals for percentage, which is out of this world good. Yet, for the first game of this playoff series, that line is broken up, and I have to say that I entirely approve of that. But before I drone on about my thoughts, which Cult of Hockey listeners know quite well by now, let's get your thoughts. Bruce, we'll start with you. What do you think of these top two lines that they're going in with?
I think they're as close to balanced as they can expect, and I'm really not surprised. I mean, Tippett is pretty consistent at going with what he's going to do, right? In practice, like he starts training camp with his idea of how the lines are going to be, and he doesn't change a whole lot by the time the season starts. And then there may be a time where they have a couple days off and they have a couple practices, and he reorganizes the lines. But once he does that, he goes with those lines for a while, and we've seen. Kahun now finally, and I know David, you were calling for it much of the year for Kahun to get a shot with McDavid, and we've finally seen that in the last 10 games or so.
Yeah.
And with Puljujarvi, and there they are still together. And at the same time, more you and others have called for the reunion of the Dynamite line, and there they are together, though they don't seem to be clicking at the level that they were last year when all three guys were red hot. This year, Leon is playing great. And both Nuge and Yam are struggling to put the puck in the net, especially at even strength, and they're squeezing the sticks, I think, a little bit tight, and the line just hasn't been going on all cylinders. And I keep hoping it's going to be one of those things where something happens, a particular moment in a game or a particular game where they connect for a big goal, and all of a sudden, they start to feel it, and because we saw last year when they are feeling it, how terrific a line that threesome can be.
I'll just quickly, Kurt, before I get you, I'll just quickly give the stats for the last year. The Dynamite line, of course, played together more than 300 minutes and scored 30 even strength goals for and gave up just 9 against, which was out of this world good as well. Just unbelievable performance. This year, that line has been together for just 112 minutes, and I would note they were put together when both Yamamoto and NugentHopkins were having injury problems. Anyway, 112 minutes this year, 4 goals for, 6 goals against, so a 40% goals for percentage. And the other line, Kahun, JP, Jesse Puljujarvi, and McDavid, together just 68 minutes, 5 goals for, 4 against, 55% goals for percentage. I'm saying to win in the playoffs, the Oilers need, from those top two lines, they need at the very minimum 55% goals for, probably 60% goals for percentage at even strength from those top two lines will be a sure signal the Oilers are winning. Kurt, what's your take on these lines?
Well, quickly bouncing off one of the things that Bruce said, I think one of the main reasons why that threesome hasn't quite clicked yet is the health of Kahun Yamamoto. I think we all thought maybe he was a little snake bit. Well, I think he's also a little nicked up. And those two things together, I think, have caused an issue. So maybe these couple of days off will help him. What I see in these two lines is it's a very subtle change for Dave Tippett to all of a sudden give the Jets a different look with his top 6. Because you can take Kahun, McDavid, NugentHopkins, and Leon Draisaitl and give them just a one counterclockwise rotation over, and all of a sudden you have 2 very different lines. You move Nuge over in the center, you move Leon up, and then you got Connor, Leon, Puljujarvi, and you got NugentHopkins, Kahun, and Yamamoto. Just like that, it's like plug and play. And I think that can be a real advantageous point that Dave Tippett can go to and pull out the whip, if you will, at any point in a game. If he feels he needs to snag momentum back, or it's a 2-1 game and he thinks if we can get another goal here, it's done, it's over. So that's what I like about the construction of those top two lines. Is I agree with you. I think this is the best balanced top 6 the team can probably have. But at the snap of the fingers, all of a sudden you can have 2 lines that look very different and can cause Winnipeg defenders 2 very different sets of problems. And so I think from that standpoint, this top 6 has a chance to be very effective against Winnipeg.
Yeah, the Kahun Yamamoto RNH line was together just for a small amount of time this year, 58 minutes, and they didn't do very well. 1 goal for, 3 against. But and I'm not a big believer in that particular line. But I think that the other thing they could do is put Cassian or McLeod into the mix on the second line too, Kurt. And
I think Zach Cassian is a whole other conversation. I agree with that, but he has to be healthy before we can insert him in, right? So.
Yeah, Kurt, you've historically liked, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Draisaitl and McDavid together.
Yep.
So what do you? But you're okay with this Like, so why do you like them together? What's your thinking on that generally?
I like them together because I don't think anybody can stop them. I don't think anybody in the league generally can stop them, and you can put your best foot forward and just step on the gas. Those two, they're special players, but 1 + 1 = 3 when they're playing together. So that's why I like them. I'm okay with this lineup though, because it's really easy for Dave for one shift or for 3 shifts to go back to them, then switch right back to this top 6 again. I think it gives them mid-game flexibility, and I think that's a good thing for a veteran head coach like Dave to have.
I'll harken back to one game against the Jets early in the season. One of the signature games of the entire season, where Edmonton led Winnipeg 2-1 well into the third period, and then Winnipeg tied it, and they went ahead with about 5 minutes left, and it looked like they were going to steal the 2 points. And that was a game where McDavid and Draisaitl were on separate lines. And after Winnipeg tied it, Tippett did the shuffle, and he had Draisaitl, McDavid, and Yamamoto, the 81% line that David mentioned earlier. And when you know, they came right out and they tied it up. 2 great passes, Draisaitl to McDavid to Yamamoto, and he stuffed it in from the edge of the crease. And then McDavid and Draisaitl with Puljujarvi were on at the very end of the game when Leon scored literally with 1 second to play in the third period to give Edmonton the win in regulation. And that was a case where Tippett was able to put his power line together and basically overpower Winnipeg with the game in the line down the stretch. Overall, though, I like the idea of them playing center because, as David pointed out in his post, Winnipeg is very deep at the center position, and if you put all Edmonton's best centers on one line, then you got to deal with all these other guys, Dubois, Stastny, assuming they're healthy, they can really come Lowry, they can really come 4 deep at you. So I think it's probably in Tippett's best interest to go put his big guys both at center.
Yeah, off the top, when I mentioned forward depth, this is what I'm talking about. I think this is the one card that Paul Maurice has where he may have an advantage over Edmonton, which is why, as David was very smart to point out in his piece, that keeping Connor and Leon down the middle probably is a pretty good tactic, because it's one area where Winnipeg probably does have a bit of an edge in terms of depth.
They have Mark Scheifele, heck of a player, obviously. He could be on Team Canada, right, at the Olympics. Adam Lowry, just a fantastic third-line center. Paul Stastny, who's still a NHL player. Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's played a lot on the wing, but he also plays center. Nate Thompson is a good grinder center, and Andrew Kopp. So they just have all these players they can try themselves at center. Very strong there. And whatever works. If it's the 81% solution line, if that's working, the only reason I never liked Draisaitl and McDavid in the past was it didn't work last year. They weren't outscoring enough. They just weren't getting it done. Just like Nuge, Puljujarvi, and McDavid this year. Hey, good in theory, but if you're not getting it done, I'm not in favor of it. But so if the Yamamoto, McDavid, and Draisaitl line, if they're going to go to that a lot and it works, like, do it. I'm just worried what happens against Winnipeg if you take away Draisaitl at center. I just really think you're going to need that big guy at center to beat both Winnipeg and to beat Toronto, who also has strong centers. So Tippett, Mark Spector was, he said that he had talked to Tippett about the whole thing. And Tippett says the reason he switches around so much, it's just like you say, Kurt, at the drop of a hat, he wants to be ready. He wants to go boom and have that other look. All of a sudden, there's this other tactical look for the team that they got to deal with. And you're going to throw the 81% line out there and change up everything. Suddenly, you're facing a whole different beast.
And you know what? NugentHopkins is pretty key in that whole plan, because if you don't have the Nuge that you can slide into that 2 center position, if you go with Connor and Leon on the same line, all of a sudden the next 2 centers up are a raw rookie and Jujhar Khaira. So the Nuge is a pretty important cog in that whole plan. I don't think it would work nearly as well in theory without him.
I'm not sure it works with him, Kurt, is my issue. I'm not a big believer of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins at center anymore. I think he's a good winger, like a good NHL winger. I'm not a believer in him as an NHL center, if I'm
Well,
completely
but if
honest.
you stack them, but if you say, well, who am I going to line up against the Winnipeg Jets at center to give yourself the best chance of winning? And your choices are Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Jujar Kara, and Ryan McLeod. I'm going to pick Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. So
All right, let's look at the bottom two lines now. We have Devin Jujar Kara centering Josh Archibald, who's just had a whale of a season, and Devon Shore. And on the fourth line, we have James Neal, Alex Chason, and Ryan McLeod. Kurt, what do you make of those two lines?
I'm okay with those. I think as soon as Zach Cassian is healthy, he's probably going to go in. My guess would be he would go in on the right-hand side, and Archibald would move over in place of Shore. But until such time that Cassian is 100% healthy, I think you've got a strong defensive energy line in the Caroline, which I think you can probably put out there in any defensive situation and feel confident in them. And I think you've got a third/fourth line with two grizzled veterans with lots of playoff experience in Chason and Neal, paired up with a really good sized, lightning fast, skilled young center, which I think can give you a depth goal here and there in the playoffs. And I don't think they'll get pushed around. And while Winnipeg, I think, is a very skilled team, I don't think they're a particularly tough team. And I think that bottom six will give Winnipeg all they can handle in terms of grit on the ice. So I don't mind them at all. And as I say, the only person who I really see ending up on a regular basis is Cassian, because otherwise I think the top 12 forwards that Dave had at practice the other day is probably the 12 he's going to go to the dance with. So
I made this point after a recent game that the bottom six, the way that Tippett has them lined up here, which was the same as he used in this game. I think it was one of the ones in Montreal, David, where we talked about how all six guys on the bottom six had a role on the special teams. That the whole third line of Kara, Archibald, and Shore, plus McLeod, were on the penalty kill units, and Neal and Chason were spelling each other off as the net front guy on the power play. And I bet you'd have to look long and hard to find a team where everybody on the bottom six is potentially in the mix on special teams. And if Zach Cassian comes back, well, he doesn't have a role on either special team, so they're going to have to figure out in advance if they're going to take Devon Shore out. Well, who are they going to replace him with on the penalty kill? Because it won't be Zach Cassian. Will it be Draisaitl? Will it be extra minutes for the other guys? Because Nuge also contributes to that unit. He plays with Kara, has for 2 years now. But they've got they really use much of their lineup gets chances on both on one or the other special teams. Nuge on both, and really only the young right wingers, Yamamoto and Puljujarvi, that don't have a real serious role on. Well, not at all on the penalty kill, or little on the penalty kill, I guess Yamamoto does, and on the power play, a little bit in the second unit, but Edmonton's second unit is really not a factor.
see, I think the Yamamoto spot is another place where Cassian could end up. To be clear, I think if Yamamoto's healthy, you put him in, because I think he's one of your six best forwards. But if he's not, it would be pretty plausible to plunk Zach Cassian in there at second line right wing, and that gives that line another look again, right? Again, I think you play Yamamoto if you have him, but if you don't, Zach Cassian is an excellent veteran depth option that you could put up there.
Yeah, I just want to say, if anyone's watching this live right now, for some reason, I can't figure out how to see your comments. Again, we're just learning this new system. So if we're not responding to your questions, if you're posing them, my apologies, because I can't see them right now. I have tweeted out a link for this, guys. It's on Twitter. So people maybe are joining in. I'm not exactly sure. We do have some people watching it, but for some reason it's not showing up. I think Gaetan Haas could get in I think Jujar Kara has been strong, or he's been okay since he came back, but he hasn't been as good as before before he got hurt the last time. He's just not as sharp and physical, and perhaps not surprising, but maybe that's going to change. And Haas can also kill penalties. So that's the one other player that I think there's a chance we're going to see. I don't think we'll see, unless there's injuries, I don't think we'll see any other guys. I think I like Josh Archibald as a bet to be like the X factor in this series. He's just been getting better and better and better this season as it's gone along. Bursting into plays, going to the net, and looking like when he goes to the net, like not like a guy who thinks there's no way I'm going to score on this shot, but like a guy who's just finally determined to score and has made up his mind. He's going to get there and he's going to put it in the net. And I think that's a huge moment for any player in the NHL when they get that kind of confidence. And I'm starting to see that with him right now. I love the fourth line. I just think those two big veterans are going to cause some havoc, just like they did last year in the playoffs. They're both very sound and underrated defensive hockey players who play their positions well and smartly, get the puck out when it comes up to them on the boards, cover the defenseman, don't allow point shots. All the good things that you want, back check hard, and they can forecheck and they'll provide a physical presence. They needed this line, though, I think is actually quite a bit better with McLeod as opposed to Haas. McLeod is every bit as fast as Gaetan Haas, and he's just more skilled and he's bigger. And so far, at least, and this is where I've been surprised. Count me as a doubter of Ryan McLeod's defensive ability so far, heading into this foray with the Oilers. I didn't think he could get it done as a center. I thought he'd be best served being on the wing, and he has done it. He's looked good. There's only been one play where he let a real nasty shot occur where he didn't cover the guy in the slot. So he's getting it done.
And you know, McLeod, small sample, has been above 50% in the faceoff circle, and Gaetan Haas, considerably bigger sample, has been well below 50%. So I think that's probably a key reason why Dave wants him in there too.
Let's move on to the defense pairing.
I'm able to see the comments, by the way, David. We've got Diego Barros saying hi from Brazil.
Cool.
That's a highlight comment that's standing out so far, and
You clicked on the Twitter link, hey, Bruce?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Well, if Bruce, why don't you be the comment guy today?
Okay.
I'm going to delegate that to you.
Sure.
And if you see anything good, just if they have questions or anything like this, chime in now and then if you want. Feel free. Let's move on to the defense, and what we see here is absolutely zero surprise, I'm guessing. Nurse, Barry, Kulikov, Larson, and Jones and Bear. You know, part of me just had a thought. Ethan Bear had a really rough start to the season. He wasn't playing well at all. Right now, though, Ethan Bear is playing great hockey. He is really moving the puck, defending well, play. And I had a thought, like, I wouldn't be surprised. Two things to happen on this defense as it goes along. First of all, if Jones struggles at all, Slater Cuckoo goes in, or if Chris Russell ever gets healthy, he goes in. If Jones struggles, if he kills it, he can hold on to this spot. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Ethan Bear move up and play with Darnell Nurse on the top pairing if Tyson Barrie has any struggles on defense. So I guess the good news is there's a number of reasonable options here. This is a solid top six defenseman with a great number one D-man in Darnell Nurse. And Kurt, you called it. He is you had it right, I had it wrong. He is a Norris Trophy candidate for sure. And so the good news is, again, they have options. They got things they can go to, and I wouldn't be surprised for Tippett to use some of those options. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, well, he's the North of the North, his Nurse. He won't win it, but in the Canadian division, North Division, he is the best defenseman on many people's lists. And really, Jeff Petrie's the only guy that's been in the discussions that I've seen in terms of who's the best defenseman in Canada. And the ones we watch at the NHL.com, they're posting their weekly award winners by division. And Darnell, last time I looked, he was unanimous, got all 5 votes. I think you wrote a post about it at that time, David, about how he was emerging. So I think there's enough top defensemen in American teams that Darnell probably won't even finish top 3, but he will get votes. I'm absolutely convinced of that, and finish, somewhere in the running. And he's made huge step forward this year. You know what? He played all 56 games this year, which is no surprise because he's done it 4 years in a row now, hasn't missed a game. But his lowest ice time of the season was 20 minutes and 53 seconds. He never played one game where he didn't play 20 minutes in the entire season. What a horse.
Great hockey player. What do you think of the defense formations, Kurt?
I think that the Oilers have a significant edge over Winnipeg here.
Yeah.
They have the best overall defenseman in Darnell Nurse. They have the best shutdown defenseman off either roster in Adam Larson. They have the most dangerous attacker off of either defense core in Tyson Barrie. And they have superior depth to Winnipeg, because if you take a look at the guys that probably won't be playing game 1, Chris Russell, Slater Cuckoo, Evan Bouchard, and William Lagesson, probably any of those 4, I won't say probably, any of those 4 would be on Winnipeg's bottom pairing. Yeah. So I think Edmonton actually has a fairly substantial edge on defense, and I just don't think that the Morrissey-DeMello pairing has the gusto to stop Edmonton's big guns.
Pionk is the guy that has driven me crazy now and then because he's a nasty physical player. I really respect his game, actually. He just plays hard, and he can really move the puck. He's a very good player. But like in all those categories you just listed, offense, defense, all around, Pionk's probably their best guy in every single one of those categories, where the Oilers kind of spread the wealth. So they're really counting on him to get a lot done, and he can't be out there against both McDavid and Draisaitl when they're split up. So that's going to be a challenge for the Winnipeg Jets is dealing with those two lines. And
I feel the same way as you do about Pionk, but in the last 2 games against Winnipeg, Paul Maurice has gone away from that matchup, and Pionk hasn't faced the McDavid line. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes come game 1 of the playoff series starting Wednesday.
I wonder if he's been hurt. Bruce, what's your any final thoughts on the D?
Yeah, well, they got some bigger, slower guys in Logan Stanley and Derek Forbort and Tucker Pullman.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think any of those guys is going to enter the speed skating in the Olympics, and McDavid. You give McDavid a 1-on-2, which you see a lot of over the game, McDavid coming in 1-on-2. He's going to pick his side of who to go in on. And if there's a slow guy on one side, then chances are he's going to go in on that side and give Buddy a lot of grief, on the way in. And Winnipeg, I mean, let's face it, they couldn't stop McDavid. He scored 2 points plus in every single game. 9 out of 9 games McDavid scored 2 goals against Winnipeg. And in the last 6 of those games that Edmonton won every game, Edmonton scored 21 goals. Winnipeg got 7. So Edmonton was shutting them down on the defensive side, and McDavid was scoring 2 or 3 or 4 points in each game. Well, it's no wonder that Edmonton was winning all the games. Winnipeg was scoring 1 goal, and McDavid was getting 2 or 3 points. I mean, that's a winning formula. So that's what they hope to keep up. And my question is, can the Edmonton defense continue to hold Winnipeg to such, a paltry outcome? And can Mike Smith, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a moment, continue to play the top-notch tending that's been frustrating the Jets? 3 of those games, all in Winnipeg, they scored 2 goals in 3 games. Right? They got outscored 12-2 on their home ice. So Edmonton was just ramping up like more and more domination as the season went along, and I mean, Winnipeg comes out and wins game 1. That changes everything. But that's what they're going to have to do is figure something out fast, because Edmonton had their number.
Even when the Oilers were a poor team, they would match up well against other teams that were kind of similar to them. Like the Oilers were a real finesse team without a lot of spine in the Decade of Darkness. And so they would match up well against, like, I remember Columbus. They always seemed to play well against Columbus as an example.
Yep.
This year, the Oilers, they're kind of similar teams in a lot of ways, the Oilers and the Jets. But the Oilers match up well against this team, I think, because of that. They're just similar teams, but the Oilers have a little bit more going on in many departments, as you enunciated earlier on, Kurt. So, which is also, this is all scary, of course, because, you know, like you say, Bruce, lose game one and all bets are off. It just suddenly seems Horrorsville. But what I like to see here is the Oilers forecheck. I think that this defense on Winnipeg can be forechecked, get in there, and this is why I think Oilers have had success in recent games. Is it's on the forecheck, it's getting in there fast, and working that puck around. You know, get the virtuous cycle going, and you're going to score some goals against this Winnipeg defense. The Oilers, Winnipeg will try to do the exact same thing to the Oilers defense, of course, get in there, forecheck, and they can also dominate the puck in the offensive end. The Oilers defense, though, you know, they've got a couple big Bobby Clobbers in Larson and Kulikov who can break up that cycle. And then the other guys, Darnell Nurse, the same thing. But the other guys can move the puck very well. Yep. They can pass that puck out of trouble, something the Oilers could never do in the past. So it's going to be interesting. You know, can Caleb Jones under pressure when he has big Blake Wheeler coming down on him, can he and Bear work that puck out of the Oilers zone? Can Kulikov do the same thing? You know, we know he can probably take the body and stop Blake Wheeler and Scheifele and Ehlers, but can he move the puck rapidly and fast? And we've seen indications this year this is a much better passing team. Also because they have centers like McDavid and Draisaitl who they can pass it to as the outlet, and those guys can carry it out. So, you know, this is why I think we've seen the domination from the Oilers. They play a similar game. The Oilers have just executed better so far this year. Alrighty. Are we goaltending? We can talk about goaltending now, I guess. Kurt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this off the top. I'm giving Winnipeg a slight edge in goaltending. I am not willing to ignore last year's spectacular season or the fact that Connor Hellebuck is a hell of a good NHL goaltender. And I think any game he could steal a game for Winnipeg. And I think that's something that the Oilers are going to have to deal with. On the other hand, Mike Smith has been the better goaltender this season. And playoffs are all about momentum. And if I think Mike Smith can continue to ride this wave of veteran confidence that he's been riding for most of the season, I think the edge Winnipeg has is a narrow one. And so that's kind of how I see goaltending. I also see both teams sticking with their number one guy no matter what. I think either one of these teams are going to lose or win with their number one goaltender, and I don't think the other guys will even see the ice unless there's an injury.
I'm seeing the comments now too, Bruce. From Daniel Fika, we have Nuge is a winger. He can't play C. And from Diego Barros, what do you think about McLeod on wing instead of centering the third line? Haas could center and leave 71 on the wing. What do you guys think about that?
I think with McLeod, he's been a center all his life. Nothing like complicating a rookie's life in the Stanley Cup playoffs than having him play a position he's barely played before. I like Dave's idea of keeping him in a position that he's familiar with and he knows how to play.
No,
Bruce,
they got
go
veteran wingers to support him, and I mean
yeah.
Neil. I mean he's a guy that could come out if he's not playing well, which I think he has been playing pretty well lately, and I expect him to step up in the playoffs. But even if he comes out, they also have, you know, options on the wing, other options like Joachim Nygaard, who looked real good in yesterday's season finale, for instance. Just looking at the net minding situation, I looked at Hellebuck's stats, and, you know, I thought he'd come down a long way from last year, but he didn't really drop all that far. He was .922 a season ago, winning the Vezina Trophy. And this year he was .916, almost identical goals against average, 2.58, very good in a three-goal league. 24, 17, and 3 record, so he got the job done. But his splits are just ridiculous. Like, here he is against the other teams. .934 against Calgary, .916 against Montreal, .911 against Ottawa, .920 against Toronto, .943 against Vancouver. Against Edmonton Oilers, .877 with a .396 goals against average. So either he figures it out or Winnipeg is in a mountain of trouble because the Oilers have gotten to him this season. And maybe, they were the right nights and the right games playing at the right time when the wrong guys were hurt from Winnipeg's perspective. However, it worked out. Hellebuck did not look like a world-class Vezina Trophy goalie in games against the Edmonton Oilers. It was almost like he was the second coming of Carey Price, David.
That really scares me what you just said, Bruce, because all he's got to do is start playing like he plays against the other teams, and suddenly this is a completely different Winnipeg Jets
Yeah.
that we're seeing against the Oilers, right? So he's letting in some soft goals against the Oilers. Obviously, you don't have a save percentage like that without letting in some soft goals. They're not all good ones, and he's not making enough saves on the grade A ones too. He just buckles down and plays his normal game, and boom, this is suddenly Scarysville. And I think this is going to be a very difficult series. I mean, when I first saw the Jets this year against the Oilers, I thought, wow, this could be the best team that I'm seeing in the North Division this year. Of course, Montreal looked pretty good at the start too, and then fell apart.
Well,
But
fair to
go
say
ahead.
we haven't seen the best of Connor Hellebuck this season. And he played 7 games against Edmonton. He's going to play up to 7 more, and I'm very confident we're going to see a lot closer to the best of him than we did in the first 7. He is a
All,
good goalie.
Alrighty. Any final thoughts on when we look at the Jets lines? Of course, we don't know what they're going to have. They're going with their top line of Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, and Blake Wheeler, which is a hell of a hockey line. Like, that's just a stacked line. We don't know who's going to be healthy on their second line. Who's it going to be, Dubois or Ehlers or Stastny or Copper. On their third line, they have Yannick Perreault, Adam Lowry, and Mason Appleton. And then they have a checking line of Vesalainen, Thompson, and Lewis, which was also very effective. And then their kind of other fourth line guys. We've got a lot of forwards: Harkins, Marco Dano, and a guy they just called up from the AHL, I understand, Toninato, who they were pretty excited about because he was providing some life in their roster. Very good group of forwards there. Very good.
If they're all healthy, yeah. I mean, if they're all healthy, then Matthew Perreault's on the fourth line. And if
Yeah.
Matthew Perreault's on the fourth line, I mean, he'd be one of the best fourth liners in the league. When he's their 10th forward, and with the capacity of filling in higher up the lineup, which he's had to do as all these other guys have been hurt. But if they're ever all healthy, they can hurt you on all 4 lines.
I agree. Health is a huge factor. I think Bruce has nailed that one. I think the other thing is, the old saying, fellas, if your best players are the best players, then you'll win. And I think on paper and by eye this season, Edmonton's best 2 players have been better than Winnipeg's best 2 players. And I think if that continues through this series, Edmonton wins. I think you can say that about practically any other team in the league. When your best players are the best players on any given night, the percentages are on your side. And so I think that's a fairly major factor. Still got to play the games. They still got to perform. But based on the numbers and what we've seen, I think we can have some confidence that they have the ability to win that battle against a Winnipeg forward group, which admittedly is very skilled. They're just not the number 1 and number 2 scorers in the league.
Kurt, I agree with that. My only concern is the games I watched this year, it seems like the team with the best goalie wins most of them. So who's going to be the best goalie? And that's the question. I have no idea. I have no idea what Mike Smith we're going to see. Some people expect him to fall off the turnip truck and into the ditch right now and revert back to the form we saw last year. I mean, I'm a believer now. He just played fantastic this year. He had the single best season a goalie his age in the NHL has ever had in league history. Remarkable season, best winning percentage. And but Hellebuck's a hell of a goalie. We just don't know that. I don't have this like, how when you're going against a team and you think, oh God, that goalie, he's just so good. Like, we'll never score. I don't have that feeling right now about Hellebuck because I haven't seen that. It's kind of hard. I don't yet, Bruce. You're right.
Well, and you know why I do give Hellebuck, the slight edge there, as I mentioned off the top. But I say it's close because Mike Smith has better defenders in front of him. The Oilers are a better defensive team. They have a better blue line. And so, Mike Smith can be less than perfect and still win with the guys that are in front of him. I don't think Connor Hellebuck has that same luxury. I don't think he can afford to make mistakes because I think the blue line in front of him is going to seep more chances through to his crease. And I think that's the difference because I'm with you. The goaltending thing, I think, is a bit of a toss-up. Winnipeg, the edge. I think it's the blue line that's going to make the biggest difference there.
And I think Mike Smith makes Edmonton's blue line better when he's in there. His ability to field and distribute the puck and get his defensemen out of positions where they're chasing and getting rammed into the glass from behind because he's already got the puck and he's got two options and they peel off to the two corners and there's one forechecker and he's confident enough and calm enough and patient enough to let that guy commit one way and he'll go the other way. And he's been not quite perfect. He's had a couple of giveaways, but last year he had several goals against on bad plays with the puck, and that's largely gone out of his game. On the downside about Mike Smith, this will chill your blood. All season long, he had in the first 30 games, he only had 9 games below 900, so 70% of his games over 900. Never once did he have 2 consecutive games below 900 until, wait for it, his last 2 games of the season. 880 against Vancouver, 897 against Montreal. Won both games, 4-3. But he had a couple of sort of questionable goals go through him, especially in that Montreal game. So we're all hoping that that's not the beginning of a dive that we've seen from him at various times in his career, including a memorable one last year in Edmonton. That's just a very small dip, and he'll come out on top of his game. Is what we're all hoping.
He is a streaky goalie.
He has that reputation.
He does. Well, it's the case. What I like about the Oilers is they have 3 players in McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nurse, who are, I just think they are desperate to win. 3 players are absolutely desperate to win. But more than that, they now know what to do to win. They've lost enough, and they've been responsible in different ways for some of those losses themselves. They've now lost enough to know in this moment where they're desperate to win, to know what desperate measures to take to win. So for that reason, that's the biggest reason I'll pick the Oilers to win this series. And Kurt, you say 6 games. I think probably most people would say 6 games, between maybe 7 games. Some people would go to. I'll say 6. Bruce?
In the all-time history of predictions of playoff series, 6 is by far the most popular number across all predictors. It comes up over and over again. Favorites and 6, favorites and 6, favorites and 6.
Well, why don't we? And this is Bruce can probably chime in here. How about the history of these 2 franchises? Because over the old Smythe division rivalries that we've seen over the years, Edmonton has the edge there too. I believe they've outscored them.
Oh, big
Was it
time.
114-73 over those series over the years? So it's. I mean, I know that and this have nothing to do with one another, but from a historical matchup, these 2 old WHA clubs, there's a lot of fun history for us old timers to compare with these 2 going head to head as well.
Well, bearing in mind that team is actually the Arizona Coyotes and this Winnipeg Jets team is actually the Atlanta Thrashers, but I'm personally prepared to put that all aside. They're the
Me too.
Winnipeg Jets. They're
Yeah.
still the Winnipeg Jets. And I go back all the way to the WHA. I remember attending a WHA game where Winnipeg beat the Oilers for fun 11-1 with Anders Hedberg scoring 4 times. And I also remember a more painful time when Winnipeg beat the Oilers in the finals of the last Avco Cup 4-2, 1979. Once they got into the NHL, everything flipped in Edmonton's favor and they beat the Jets 6 times. All 6 times the Oilers went to the Stanley Cup final. The last 5 of them, they won the Stanley Cup by going through Winnipeg. So it's a good team to have first up on the plate as a team with that city with that past history of the road to the Stanley Cup goes to Winnipeg. Okay, here we are again.
And we can
That's,
go further back, right? Because these were the final two combatants for the Avco Cup as well.
right. 19. Yeah, Jets won that one though, Kurt.
Yeah.
But
They were a hell of a team.
later on, the Oilers got Willie Lindstrom off that team. He won a couple cups here, and later after that, they got Kent Nilsson off that team. He won a cup here, and more importantly than that, Glenn Sather got ideas about how to play offensive hockey, how to do the crisscrossing, how to use the European style within the North American pro system, the hot line, especially of Hedberg, Ulf Nilsson, and Bobby Hull. Were an inspiration to Glenn Sather. He said they opened his eyes to a new way hockey could be played, and it was a lesson he took to heart that really worked out well for the Oilers of the 1980s, who played some of that signature. Remember all the crisscrossing they did? They come in over the blue line 2-on-2, and they'd both cut into the middle, and one guy would drop the puck to the other guy and take out one of the defenders, and the other guy, typically Messier and Anderson were outstanding at that, but there was, that was just a style of play that really sprung out of the WHA, where the Winnipeg Jets were in fact the standard bearers. So I have a kind of a warm place in my heart for Winnipeg, but maybe it's because the Oilers always beat them.
I was just thinking that, Bruce.
Came to shove.
I was just thinking that. That's why we love that team so much, because we've never really suffered at their hands as fans.
Well, other than that one Avco Cup, that did
Yeah,
hurt.
but you know what, Bruce? They deserved that. They were just so much better than the Oilers. That line,
The
and I think
first
that's
place
another.
Oilers?
That's another reason though that we love that. I can't remember if Hedberg and Nielsen were on that team at that time.
Not 79. No,
No,
they
they
went to
by
New
then.
York in 78.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But watch it. How could you hate that line? I mean, it was just they were such clean. And Bobby Hull he must have had the time of his life playing with Ulf Nielsen and Anders Hedberg, because they were just such skilled hockey players, so fast, good with the puck, sharing the puck, and I'm hoping that's what we see from the Dynamite line. That kind of tic-tac-toe, sharing the puck, moving the puck around hockey, because that's what we saw last year. So fingers crossed about that. The series, the Jets Oilers series that I remember by far though the most is the 1990 one where the Oilers, I think they were down 3-1 if I'm not mistaken, and they came back and won that. And it was because of a couple things. Bill Ranford finally got his game together as a goalie, and he had played poorly in the first couple of games, but there was a tactical shift that the Oilers coach John Muckler made early in that series, where he put together the kid line, Jelena, Graves, and Joe Murphy. And it just became this, they didn't score a lot, but they became the ultimate zone
Momentum
possession.
changers.
They just had the puck in the other team's end the whole game long. And then you'd have out Mark Lamb with Curry and Tikkanen, and Messier, I think it was Simpson and Anderson, and McTavish with, can't recall the...
Puckberger and Klima.
There you go. 4 really good lines. So this Oilers team, they got the superstar just like they had in Messier back in the day. But I think Tippett, one of the other keys is going to be which coach conjures up the best lines. Who comes up with the winning combinations under pressure? And Tippett, so far, last year in the playoffs, was a massive freaking disappointment in that regard, I'm going to say.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think he got it wrong. But he has gotten it right a number of times. He has put together lines that have worked at different times, including this Yamamoto, Draisaitl, McDavid line this year, which maybe it's not the hardest thing to put together. But with the Dynamite line last year and with other combinations, other checking combinations, defense pairings, he is an outstanding coach, and he's gonna be called upon, I think, at some point in this series to make a really key move or two. And as will his counterpart in Winnipeg. We'll see who gets it right and who gets it wrong.
Coaching could really be a critical part of this playoff series. And I'd argue Dave Tippett's been the better head coach this year, not just tactically, but also in how he's handled his players. And I think that you can draw a direct line to when Winnipeg started to struggle this season, when Paul Maurice did what he did with Mark Scheifele. I think that was a miscalculation. I don't think you show up your best player. I don't think Scheifele's been as good since. I don't think the Jets have been as good since. Dave Tippett is smart enough to not do that. And I think that the Oilers are going into this series on a high, And while the Jets won a couple games at the end of the season, it was the end of the season, and I just don't think everything's right in that dressing room. And that could be a factor as well.
What happened? Just refresh everyone's memory, Kurt, for those who don't remember what happened with
Benched him.
Shifley. For
Big
how long?
game.
Yeah, in a
Go
big
ahead.
game. I mean, can you imagine the hell that would be paid if Dave Tippett in a big game would bench Connor McDavid, his best player? Well, he wouldn't do it, right? I think it's a card that Paul Maurice thought he needed to play, but I think it was a bad miscalculation. I think Shifley has not been as good since. I don't think that can be argued, and I think he's paying for it now. And then, once you've torn those bricks down, it's kind of hard to put that building back together again. And there's been some people have said, you know what, this year is maybe the first time that Paul Maurice has worn out his welcome in Winnipeg after a very long, admirable, and successful run. But that's a factor I'd keep my eye on.
I heard some long knives coming out in the national media in the direction of Paul Maurice that made it sound like someone somewhere was greasing the skids for his departure. Certainly, that was a flashpoint when, Shifley, he had an absolutely terrible shift. I watched it. They were playing Toronto, and it was a big game. And Shifley had about 4 or 5 mistakes, the last one of which was a terrible slow line change on a 4-on-4 that exposed the defense to a 2-on-1, which Toronto quickly converted into a goal. It was like, David, you and I would have had we would have sliced and diced it too. But Maurice, he did the Dallas Aikens thing, and he sat the guy on the bench for it was like early in the second period, and he sat there for the whole rest of the period while Toronto sort of seized control of the game, and he put him back out there in the third, but the damage was done. And it was like Kurt said, he played a card, but maybe it was a card he would have been better just to hang on to.
A card too far.
He was tripping it old school, eh? Because when you talk about who benches their star players, well, of course, in the old days, Gretzky got benched, Messier got they all did, right? But it's not how it rolls these days, is it? That's not what happens so much anymore. I guess.
See how it worked for John Tortorella this year.
Yeah. So what I did hear from listening to a couple podcasts in the Jets is that Kyle Connor, Shifley, and Wheeler were getting close to playing their A game again, close to, but not quite there. And the message got through to them, they have to play defense. So these particular podcasters, at least, I can't remember who it was. I was listening to a couple different ones. We're kind of maybe siding with the coach that there were some major defensive issues that had to be cleared up. On the other hand, there's always with star players, half the time I'm railing about Draisaitl and McDavid defensive mistakes on this podcast. And there are those issues come up with star players, but I didn't see Tippett ever give them anything but more ice time and free reign to keep, and this is where I really approve of the coach and the approach, free reign to just keep attacking like crazy. And I think he's working with them slowly, patiently, to improve their defensive play, get better as defensive players, and they both have. They are getting better, and to the point where I think they both really know what to do now. They're quite well schooled in defense, and I really saw this particularly with McDavid this year. I thought he took a marked step up in his defensive play. He was covering the defensive slot much better than he did a year ago, and I think that McDavid and Draisaitl are ready to bring their A game on defense as well. And when that happens, that's going to be fantastic to behold.
Yeah, one thing I took away from watching the 9 Winnipeg games against the Oilers this year in particular was Kyle Connor on Winnipeg, who's a terrific and dangerous attacking player, but I see him as a weak defensive player. He was getting, making poor decisions and chasing the wrong guy and watching the puck. He was doing the Sam Gagner puck watching thing, like just too often, and it would lose his man, and his man would wind up putting the puck in the net or help to do so. And so they've got, as good as those guys are, and you have to respect their strengths. I mean, Kyle Connor is going to probably burn the Oilers with some goals in this series, but you have to take advantage of their weaknesses, and hopefully you come out ahead in the long run. And that's one player I think they can, or they have certainly during the season taken advantage of his so-so defensive play.
Alrighty, any final thoughts, gentlemen? Anything you'd like to? I'm just looking at the comments here. Any final thoughts? I saw someone check in from New Zealand just
Oh,
now, Bruce.
nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
that was cool. I can't find the reference right now, but welcome to our fans or the fans of the Oilers in New Zealand and around the world. It's always cool. Brazil, I think.
Newfoundland.
Yeah. Final thoughts?
Well, go Oilers is mine as a fan blogger, and I was a fan for a long time before I was a blogger. That this is a time of year that that hockey really gets exciting and fun and tense and a series is like a it's like a 7-part novel, where each one tells its own story, and yet it's only part of the bigger story. Each game is contributing to the longer term narrative as well as having its own result. And there's nothing quite like a best of 7 series in hockey. Nothing like it, really.
Yeah, well said. I kind of have a personal connection with the Winnipeg franchise. I saw my very first in-person NHL game in
yeah.
Winnipeg, 1984. It was Winnipeg playing the Detroit Red Wings, which had Jim Leavins on defense that night and Brad Park behind the bench. And it was in the old Winnipeg arena with the big, beautiful portrait of the Queen in one end of the rink. And so I've had that memory burned into my brain for many years. And whenever we play the Jets, I always think of that game. This little kid from Saskatchewan finally found his way into an NHL arena, and I thought I had the world by the tail. So it's
Was that a family outing where all the Levins went down to watch Jim play?
Yeah, we all went down and all met
Nice.
Underneath the stands after the fact. And I remember when Brad Park walked by, I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my God, that's Brad Park." I've been watching you in Hockey Night in Canada for 15 years, right? So yeah, it was pretty special. We'll never forget it. So
My first NHL game was also featured the Detroit Red Wings at Edmonton on October 13th, 1979. When we got in the league, I was a season ticket holder, and that was game number 1, fittingly against Detroit Red Wings that had a long storied connection with the city of Edmonton and the Edmonton Flyers. So it was a really good choice for the first game, and a very memorable occasion. 3-3 tie. How'd your game work out, Kurt?
Detroit lost, and I believe the score was 5-2, if memory serves me right.
Okay.
I don't remember my first NHL. I just remember my first Oil Kings game. It was Darcy Rhoda and the Oil Kings against Ron Chipperfield and the Brandon Wheat Kings. I don't. And then I went to WHA games after that, including seeing the Winnipeg Jets play the Seattle Mariners in San Diego.
Oh.
But I don't know if that was my first program I ever saw or not. Anyway,
Ron Chipperfield was some kind of junior hockey player, man.
Oh God, he was a good hockey player.
Yeah.
I just want to, it's funny because this is fan time, Bruce, and we are fans. And I think most people realize this. Like, I work for the Edmonton Journal. I am not a sports writer. I'm a political columnist, but I write as a fan. And early in my career, I wanted to be a sports writer for a long time. And I've written a lot of sports stories over the years where I've actually worked as a reporter and acted as a reporter. But in the end, I'm really glad that this whole internet thing came along and allowed people like myself and you guys who are just fans to have this place where we can talk to other fans and express ourselves and not have to become like the other avenue would be, Kurt, you've been a professional journalist a long time, to get into that whole covering it and you've done that, I think, Kurt, you've done that job.
Yep.
And I'm glad I think it's a really hard job, a difficult job and a challenging job. But the hard thing would have been not being a fan anymore because I love this team and love rooting for it. Be a lot to give up.
Well, for me, after all those years of not being able to be a fan, you don't ask for autographs when you're a journalist and you're in an NHL arena. You don't cheer for one team or another, even when you're on the host broadcast. There's no cheering in the press box, right? So one of the great reliefs of being a member of the cult of hockey is I get to just be a fan again, and it's pure joy. It really is.
Alrighty, let's leave it there, guys. We will reunite. Some of us, all of us, throughout this playoff series for the post-game podcast. And thanks, Kurt, and thanks, Bruce, for talking tonight.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Good to see you.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.